Got it.
I was on mute, sorry. Next, we want to jump into our objectives for the Leadership Academy this year. And so we have 3 objectives this year. The first one is to invest in youth empowerment, leadership, and development skills, which are all 3 really important skills to have. The second one is to service provision through the cultural lens of the impacted community. And the third objective for this Leadership Academy is going to be the promotion of population level impacts through policy, systems, and environmental change.
I guess I'll read it. So this is just our objectives and our summary for the program. Those who went to the intro session probably have seen this slide before, but I'll read it again for those who haven't. So our Leadership Academy is a 12-week program for youth out of home care through the foster care or juvenile justice systems. So having youth involvement and engagement in policy development is critical to creating policies that best serve youth and their families. And these academies are in place for youth leaders to learn skills, practice and develop the professional networks to be effective advocates for themselves and other youth. The first 8 weeks will be designated to your training. We'll go over that syllabus later in this session. And the last weeks are for your project implementation. So ideally you'll be how do you say place, whatever. You will be placed in a project implementation site in your region to conduct the research. Well, basically virtually, you'll have access to youth if you decide to do a survey or further information just to strengthen your advocacy for whatever issue you want to bring to light. And basically all of that will be utilized to develop a campaign to improve the lives of systems involved youth.
All right, so we're gonna go over some of the meeting dates, and I'm sure you guys have had conversations with your CACs and all that good jazz. This group right here, this is the statewide cohort group. So as you've seen in the intros, myself from Southern, Jay from South Bay, and Jessica from Northern. All of those youths from those regions will get together on Mondays and really kind of, as a group, kind of figure out the direction and listen to presentations and kind of really get educated on what you guys may want to work on within your region. So all of February, the 8th to 15th and the 22nd, and then all of March. The last 4 weeks of that is where you will do project work. And it's a project-based work that your regional group, which you'll have in your second meeting of the week, will really look at what it is that they want to work on and focus on. And then expectations, it's kind of small. So, and it's expected that, you attend all these meetings. We hold the relevant conversations, we invite great speakers and great opportunities for you guys to be able to gain knowledge so that when you get homework assignments that we'll talk about later, you'll be able to use it. Like everything is gonna be, is relevant. And if you miss it by any chance, then hopefully we'll have a recording for you that you'll be able to catch up on that later. Jake.
Thank you, Kenny. So yeah, your expectations are to attend your training sessions. The dates on the left are our Monday sessions. You'll be in breakout rooms with your region to discuss when to meet. So that will definitely be up to y'all. If you have any calendars or things out, that'll be helpful. Just so that you don't have any clashing commitments. So now we're gonna go into our reference folder. So before I jump into that, I kind of wanted to outline some of the things that are included. 1 second. So the folder that we're talking about is the 4 leaders folder. I should have put quotations around 4 leaders because that's what it's titled. And it will include the syllabus that has the meeting dates and topics. And as we decide which guest speakers, it will be updated and we'll also keep you in the loop on that. Homework uploads that are due before the start of each session. Your W-9 form. We need you to upload the completed form ASAP because we want to get you on that payroll. The check request form is also in there. I'm going to show you what that looks like just so no one's confused when you go into the folder. And this will also be a space where you can upload your project documentation and share it with your coaches. And when you come up with those dates in your regional groups, make sure that you're answering yes or no to those calendar invites and let us know ahead of time if you have any conflictions. Communication is key. We don't want to withhold your payment at all. We want to make sure that we're working with you. So as long as you communicate with us, we can support you in making sure you're caught up in all facets of that. So I'm going to exit out of here. So this is the 4 leaders folder. It has your blank W-9 form. When you go into this folder, it will be shared with all of you. When you go into this folder, just open it with your Google Docs and fill it out or use Adobe, whichever way that you want to fill it out. You can print it out, sign it, scan it, but we need it back is what I'm getting at. And on the check request form, so we have to submit these check requests. And the only thing that I need from you all is for you to come into this folder, make a copy so that you don't mess up the template, make a copy of this, put your date, the start date, your name and your address, your email address, and your delivery method. So we have an online payment through bill.com and we can send you, you have to sign up for it. So if that's the option you want, you will be provided a link to sign up for bill.com, which is pretty fast, or you can have it mailed to you in a paper check. So again, I just need date, name, address, email address, and your delivery method preference. And just when you fill that out, upload it back into the folder with your name and your region. That's all that I need, just so we can coordinate. A little bit about the payment breakdown is you get $60 a week for training attendance, and our, I don't know why the training dates aren't there, but we'll go to the syllabus for that. And you get $45 a week for assignment completion and meeting with your coach. So once we introduce you to your coaches via email, it's very imperative that you set up a time that works for both of you. Of course, it can be flexible. I'm not monitoring that connection really heavily as long as you're documenting your process. You get $16.50 up to 2 hours, up to 10 hours a week during your project phase. So that's 40 hours of work that you have for your project implementation. And the checks will be issued every 2 weeks, but this is totally dependent on whether or not we're receiving your documents on time. And you have a chance up to earn up to $16.50. And so there's the syllabus right here, but I have it pulled up. And we're just gonna run through this really quickly. So this is just a timeline, and we will be updating it as we go along. Depending on where everyone's at, we definitely meet and discuss what the next steps are. So not everything's fully fleshed. So here's today. Our goal is to save all dates on the calendars as groups, making sure that you have your meeting dates down for all of your necessary meetings with your coach, with your region, statewide. And we also have a guest speaker, Ferguson. Super, super stoked to have him here again. and he's going to be speaking on the topic of war on drugs. We have a hand raised. Go ahead.
Hi, so I was just wondering, just to make it easier on you guys, and so for the paperwork and everything, when is a good time to have it submitted? Like
As possible. Like,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Ideally, tomorrow morning, processing as much as it's really, you know, we want to make sure you get paid on time. So that's the contributing factor. We have a hand raised from Ethan.
Yes, so I have a question. Do I have to redo all this paperwork? Because I think I already have a W-9 on file and I already have my bill.com set up.
You're totally fine, Ethan.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure so that way I know like what I need to do.
Yeah, the only thing I do need from you is the check request.
Okay.
Yeah, because that goes under a different item number.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
No problem. Moving along. Session 2, we're going to be talking about discrepancies in education system, mental health instability, and accessing services. We have a guest speaker who will be speaking on juvenile injustices and his personal experiences with that. And we will be taking a closer look at intensive treatment foster care versus therapeutic foster care. Session 3 will be really starting to of course, we're going to have a little bit more time to get to know each other. This day is going to be dedicated to nurturing the leader in you. We'll be coming straight out of Day at the Capitol. I know some of you may be signed up for that. Let me know if you also want to attend that. It's going to be amazing. We will recap that and we'll talk about leadership styles, strengths, weaknesses, and goals. Then we get into March. This is where the fun starts happening. We will be going over some research methods and strategizing communication. Welcome. Make sure we're welcoming the people in the chat that are just coming in. Yeah, so we'll be exploring compelling ways to move people into taking action. And our guest speaker will be centered on data collection and strategic storytelling. I have a few people lined up for that. I'm really just trying to see which one is best suited for this group. So then we get into the brainstorming the project plan, start thinking about topics. We'll go over a little bit of what the last cohort did. So if any of you want to take on where they left off instead of starting from scratch, that's something that's extremely powerful and encouraged. Dream mapping. This is going to be a great session. Mark this in your calendar with a star next to it. We have Princess Santa Maria, amazing friend, family, and former foster youth who specializes in dream mapping. And when I say she really does, y'all, I can't even explain it. You just got to be there. And in this, we will be more intentionally planning it out. Ethan, is your hand still raised or is it from earlier? I don't know.
Oh, I think that was from earlier. My bad.
Just checking. In session 7, you will be given space to really sit with your coaches, with your CACs, and have some feedback time from us. So coming in with some material, wherever it's at in its development, we'll be there for you. So we'll be spending that time really developing it. And on our last session, we'll be having a little celebration for completing the training. We'll do some reflection, some plus and deltas. That's really helpful for me and my team in terms of feedback, what we can do better. Which speakers do you think were dope? Which speakers were whack? We'll never get them again. And we'll do a show and tell. So that's to come. And a little specification about homework. Homework will be assigned after each session via email, and it's to be completed before the start of the next session. All homework assignments must be submitted to the 4 leaders folder. Remember, put your name and your region. If you have any questions, concerns, or technical issues, please reach out to inform your CAC as soon as probable. Remember, communication is key and making sure you are receiving the support you need throughout the duration of this cohort. I'm gonna always say communication is key here because, like I said, we want to support you all, We don't want you to feel like this is a lot of pressure. You have to go into hiding, or you don't want to, you don't want to tell us what's going on because you're afraid you're going to get some sort of, repercussion compensation wise. As long as you're communicating with us, we are working with you. We want you to receive these trainings to the best of your ability, and communication will help us ensure that. So if you have any complications, things coming up, we're in a whole pandemic, that's totally understandable. We just ask that you communicate in a timely manner. And for the month of April, you'll be finalizing your project data collection and constructing a presentation for the final watch party. In session 5, y'all will kind of get an understanding of what that watch party looks like, because we'll look at last cohort and kind of, see what they came up with, or an example. Okay. Again, communication is key. So in lieu of notifying attendance on calendar, I guess this will be a good time to go into our breakout sessions. In these breakout sessions, we just ask that you prioritize coming up with a start date. So you'll have a good, we are actually good on time. You'll have 25 minutes, is what it looks like, for your regional meeting agreements. You'll have your getting to know you activity, coming up with a meeting date, and exchanging / noting best month of contact / expectations. So on the screen down below, you should see a breakout room option. Let me know if you don't, so I can freak out. There's Northern, South Bay, and Southern. So if you're with Kenny, you're with Southern. If you're with Jessica, you're with Northern. South Bay, that's me. So make sure that you're in the right group. And we'll be back at 45.
And if you don't know what group to go into, we can help, or if you're not updated, we can send you into the group.
That's 45. I mean 50. So y'all have 20 minutes. Am I doing math correctly? No, I'm not. Hold on.
Sorry, but I don't see a breakout rooms option here.
Come here. Someone not mute.
So I think I should join the South Bay one.
Yeah, that's the one. It should be at the bottom of the screen towards the reaction button.
Yeah, I only have reaction and then record, share screen. I don't have a breakout.
Oh, I can put you in there.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew, where did you say you were? San Mateo. Oh, you will be with Jessica.
Okay.
What about me, Angelica? Kenny? Will I be with Kenny?
Yeah, you will be with Kenny.
Okay.
Okay. All right, y'all. See you back.
7. Oh, I'll put you in South Bay.
Thank you.
Vanessa, I don't know where you go.
Are these coaches?
Yes, Vanessa's.
Yes. Coaches are with me. I'm so sorry. I forgot to specify that. You're with me.
Hey, Vanessa.
The best place ever. Yes.
I'm gonna send you over there. Okay. All right, Jay, I'm gonna jump into my room now.
And it looks like everyone is still in their breakout rooms, and so they should be joining us shortly. So we'll go ahead and just wait for everybody else to join us again.
All right, y'all. And I encourage, if you can, for our guest speaker to just, turn your cameras on, put your focus, get grounded. We're about to talk about something very, very important, especially crucial to the development of y'all projects. And I hope that y'all got y'all meetings down. If not, of course, there's always time for email follow-up, and I'll coordinate with my CACs. For some reason, just for full transparency, my computer is not holding a charge right now. So I just wanted to go ahead and introduce our guest speaker before any other complications come up. So we have a guest speaker here today. Let me know if y'all can hear me because it's kind of lagging. So
lagging a little bit.
We have a guest speaker here. I'm for y'all. It's lagging a little bit. Okay, can y'all hear me now? Oh man. Give me a second. Let's see. Okay, can someone let me in? I'm on the room. Okay. Okay. All right. Luckily, I have my backup laptop. Sorry about that. That was kind of random. Let me just pull up these slides really quick. Apologize for the technical difficulties. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce Khalil Ferguson, a super powerful overall individual. I just have a lot to say. So I'm just going to read off of this so I can constrict myself. So Khalil is alumnus of CSU, Sacramento, where he earned his bachelor's degree in international relations and economics. Throughout his undergraduate and postgraduate career, Khalil's studies have analyzed the impacts of economic policies on communities who sit on the margin of economic calculation while working to make sure that they are included in development opportunities. Khalil's data and research-driven perspective, along with connections to drug war impacted communities and millennials of color, is exactly what the community can use to provide the material conditions of colonized individuals within these communities. And we will be covering an intro to the war on drugs. So Jessica, if you are ready, and Khalil, if you wanted to give us an introduction as we pull up your slides, feel free to do so.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely have one more slide on the PowerPoint as well. Just give it another explanation of myself as well, or just an identification. So thank you for those lovely words. I appreciate you so much. And again, thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to be in this space and to share this space with you all as we give an education on the war on drugs one-on-one. It is a little dense. It gets a lot more dense, when you start peeling back the layers, but we're going to go ahead and dive into it. So My name is Khalil Ferguson. Next slide, please. Pronouns are he, him, his. I'm from Richmond, California. A Sac State graduate. I study international relations and economics. Identify as a Pan-Africanist, political economist, and a guerrilla intellectual. And a guerrilla intellectual is something I learned through my reading. And I love it because it was coined by a revolutionary Pan-Africanist. He's a historian from Trinidad. His name is Walter Rodney. And although, he identifies as a third world Pan-Africanist, and while we've moved away from the term third world and first world, he still identifies as that. So I respect him in the coining of the term third world Pan-Africanist. He actually has a theology himself that he's created called third worldology, something like that, I forgot. But essentially a guerrilla intellectual is someone who wages war on the power structure by taking it head on. And there's that information I don't really like reading off a slide, but that's there for you guys to read if you like. But really what a guerrilla intellectual is in the lens of Walter Rodney, is someone who not only rejects the power structure and the education and the theories, the perspectives coming from the power structure, which is the colonial power structure here in the U.S. and most colonial or ex-colonial territories. But it's not even enough to reject that. As a guerrilla intellectual, we must take over that and take over the means of production for knowledge. And that's some of the biggest things where we're in academia, is that not only are we learning the information, but then when we get to a higher ed, if we're not taking this Pan-African or this revolutionary perspective or this lens, then we're merely just producing more of the colonial knowledge that we say we want to eradicate, so we want to move away from. And essentially, guerrilla intellectual is someone who takes that, like guerrilla warfare, and brings that battle to academia to win that battle. And now we have a decolonized academic structure. Next slide, please. So let's dig into it. With regards to the war on drugs one-on-one. Most basic academics or people in academia, the most basic education you'll get on the war on drugs teaches that the war on drugs began with Richard Nixon and was inherited by Ronald Reagan in the 1970s. However, that to an extent is true. It's a little bit misleading. The war on drugs really started in the late 1800s. It was very xenophobic against Asians. However, that led quickly. That was really for opium. It led quickly into marijuana during the 1930s and the marijuana prohibition. And the marijuana prohibition was often associated with Latinos, Latinx identification, and Black folks here in the United States. That person who started the rhetoric was a man by the name of Harry Anslinger, and he was commissioner for what was called at the time the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. And I have a quote from him under his picture, in which he says, "Reefer make darkies think they're as good as white men. There are 100,000 total marijuana smokers in the U.S., and most are Negroes, Hispanics, Filipinos, entertainers. Their satanic music, jazz, and swing result from marijuana use. This marijuana causes white women to seek sexual relations with Negroes, entertainers, and any others." And the term marijuana was actually a phrase used, coined by these people, the perpetrators of the war on drugs in the 1930s, to associate that with anti-Mexican rhetoric. That's where the term marijuana comes from. It was all, we spell it with a J now, but they said it with an H back in that time. It was really, a very kind of, a derogatory phrase because it was associated with Mexican usage of cannabis. Next slide, please. There, yes, like I was going into. It was a time that anti-drug zealots swapped the term cannabis for marijuana, marijuana or marijuana, however you want to say it, hoping the Spanish word would conjure anti-Mexican sentiment. Newspapers, whether they believed it or not, went alongside for the ride, running headlines like "Murderers due to killer drug, marijuana flicking the United States." His efforts culminated with the passage of the Marijuana Tax Act in 1937, which really made the tax so prominent on cannabis that it was effectively a bad business, essentially really banning it. There's no actual language in the Marijuana Tax Act saying that cannabis is illegal, but the business, trade, and association of all that stuff surrounding the transport and commercial sale of cannabis was taxed in a way that you either had to be a doctor with special privileges and paid a high tax for it. That was really the only person who could do it. Otherwise, there was no reason to engage in it. And if you weren't, you really would, end up in jail for the most part. So essentially, made it, through economic terms, they made it illegal. So sale of marijuana required extensive record keeping. Technically, like I said, the act did not keep medical marijuana illegal. However, the extensive regulatory framework, as we even have now, surrounding the use of it in medical research, made the process basically impossible. An individual sale and possession became illegal. And as we see at the bottom, anyone who did not pay the tax could be punished by either a fine of $2,000, 5 years in prison, or both. And mind you, this is in 1937. $2,000 in 1937. I haven't done the math. Is relatively a large amount of money in today's currency. So at that time, poor Black folks who couldn't afford it are becoming marginalized and further disenfranchised. And of course, if you couldn't afford it, then you were also in prison, which we know is an extension of the slave, the plantation, really. Next slide, please. So here we have Louis Armstrong, famous jazz performer. He promoted, in his music and in his activism, he actually promoted cannabis use as a relaxant. He says in a quote in the text below, which says, "Music makes you forget all the bad things that happened to a Negro." He was arrested for possession in 1930, and much of his crusade against marijuana was predicated on the racist fear that drugs in the hands of Blacks pose a danger to white women and children. And it's pretty interesting because how even Northern Democrats at the time, or even before that, they're around Reconstruction and the prior to the Civil War, would often post stuff like that about how freeing Black men, or however integrating with Black men, was associated with, Southern Democrats, I apologize, would associate Black men with raping white women, with regards to free Negroes, with regards to integration, with regards to interracial relationships, with regards to commingling with Black men would lead to some way the raping of white women. So it's pretty interesting how that that rhetoric has always been used with regards to relations between Black men and white women throughout history. Next slide, please. So what officially really started the war on drugs, for the most part, on top of the Prohibition by Harry Anslinger in the 1930s, was the passing of the Boggs Act of 1951 and the Daniel Act in 1956. They drastically strengthened the punitive actions regarding illegal marijuana in the United States. And the Boggs Act in 1951 has the language below, which really changed the Internal Revenue Service Code, which really made it a lot more punitive. Then, of course, on top of that, we have the Daniels Act in 1956, which added to that as well. And then, of course, it starts getting worse as the DEA gets created, which will probably be on the next slide. And then, of course, Richard Nixon begins to enter the picture, and Ronald Reagan does as well. Next slide. Yes. So from the Bureau of Narcotics that Harry Anslinger started in the 1930s, that begins to transition into the formation of the DEA. It was founded July 1st, 1973, under President Nixon, of course, formerly the Bureau of Narcotics. And it was created really, and it's interesting how legislation goes. So right now, and I'll get to talk about this later, but right now I do state policy in California for cannabis. And what's being created as a result of now a new regulated market is the Cannabis Enforcement Unit. And it comes out of bills and legislation and budget allocations. Actually, it's that one for the Cannabis Enforcement Unit, that's actually being funded by Prop 64 or legal cannabis tax dollars. So that's really how legislation comes about, to influence and create different entities that will regulate and enforce, punitive, non-punitive, however you want to see it, but regulatory areas of cannabis. So the DEA was created in conjunction with the Controlled Substances Act of 1970. Next slide, please. So there we go. And this is some language. It's called what the Controlled Substances Act of 1970 essentially established the schedules that we have now for different drugs. Now that Prop 64 has passed in 2016, marijuana is in California, it's no longer a Schedule 1 drug. However, federally, it still is, which is why you can't access federal, federal dollars or federal programs if you're, associated with cannabis. So, as a part of the Controlled Substances Act of 1970, on top of establishing the schedules for various drugs like cocaine, meth, etc., cannabis, it also established the DEA. And it's pretty, again, this is really where we see the strengthening of punitive laws against Black and brown folks and poor folks, of course. Next slide, please. There we go. So now we get into the meaty part of what most people know about the Nixon's war on drugs, associated with Ronald Reagan and Richard Nixon. On June 17, 1971, President Nixon declared drug abuse as public enemy number one, with a lot of racial undertones. John Enrichman, I don't know how to say some of these names. Nixon's domestic policy chief was quoted saying in 1968, the Nixon campaign and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and Black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew this. We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and the criminalizing both heavy, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know that we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. And one thing I didn't leave out that requires a lot of you could watch a lot of Netflix documentaries. Don't forget that at this time we're seeing an influx of cocaine and drugs into a lot of the black communities, also during the Black Liberation Movement. So it's very much layered as to why the war on drugs is very much a racist policy that really drastically affected black and brown folks and marginalized communities in these areas. On top of them being planted in our communities, and then used as a reason to increase police surveillance in our communities. Next slide, please. So then we transition to the regime of Ronald Reagan. On October 14th, 1982, President Reagan declared illicit drugs as a threat to national security, essentially mirroring what President Nixon said, but he ramped up the policing of the war on drugs. So the reason why I have the picture, of course, of the St. Louis County Police Department and their gear is because it's really Ronald Reagan's to blame for the reason why we have policed heavily militarized police units and police departments, and of course everything goes back to Reagan. So go back a little bit. When I talk about neoliberal economics, is what we the academic term for what we call Reaganomics. So in the hood or in marginalized communities, we often say Reaganomics. Reaganomics and neoliberal economics are really the same thing because it originates with Ronald Reagan. During Ronald Reagan's presidency, we really see the policing of cannabis and the drug war strengthened and heightened. Really reaches its peak. I guess it really doesn't come down, but under Ronald Reagan, we start seeing being a conservative, pro-law, anti-drug proponent. We really see the policing of black and brown communities strengthened. So during his tenure, the legislation that passed during his presidency was the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986, and he made amendments to the Military Cooperation with Civilian Law Enforcement Agencies Act of 1981, heavily strengthening the connection between local police departments, federal police departments, and the military. These two acts work together to increase the punishment for drug use while also giving law enforcement military equipment and training. These acts drastically increase the number of police patrolling in black and brown communities, which we know is a pipeline for the prison industrial complex. Next slide, please. So, and that's language from the Military Cooperation with Civilian Law Enforcement Act. I could take some time for you all to read it. This language can be very dense sometimes. It's just really like another language when we're reading some of these federal enforcement codes. And some of the arguments that a lot of these police departments will use for their continued usage of military gear is that they aren't military. SAC PD within the past year recently bought the Bearcat, the same Bearcat or the same instrument that was used to evict the moms for housing in Oakland. And they did it without they did it really last minute without public notice. And their argument was that it's not military grade, and it's really used for protection. However, a quick definition of a Bearcat, if you look it up on Google, says used by military and law enforcement agencies. So they like to hide behind that rhetoric and saying they need it, and they will. They actually have. It's interesting. SAC PD actually still has an old they say it's an operational Bearcat that they actually received from the U.S. military and said, oh yeah, so the city council asked what they were going to do with it, and they said they're going to give it back to the U.S. military. But why do they have U.S. military grade equipment, on our streets? Pretty interesting. Next slide, please. There we go. The Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986. There's language there for you as well. Like I said, again, Ronald Reagan really changed a lot of legislation to make drug usage very punitive. And I need to do some more digging or some refreshing, but I don't believe it was him that created the 5-to-1 rule. And the 5-to-1 rule was basically whatever you got for 1 year of cocaine, you would get 5 years for in the same weight for crack. And of course, we know often more Black and brown communities often had crack over cocaine because cocaine is a lot, it's really a rich man's, drug is what they say. Clearly undertones of racist policies, given that no matter what, for the same usage or for the same weight, someone who's, more likely to be Black or brown will get penalized for its possession. And it's not even really the sale, or it's for the sale as well, but more than often, 80% of the drug war targeted, users and possessors of drugs, specifically cannabis, really criminalizing or prioritizing the criminalization of drug usage. Next slide, please. I think it's some more language for another bill. Or that one black? One more time. There we go. Oh no, there should be one more before that. Go back. Interesting. Okay. So I'll just speak on whatever. That slide should have been the regime of Bill Clinton. And we know how Bill Clinton also played a role in heightening the war on drugs on top of the prison industrial complex. And Bill Clinton and Joe Biden, our lovely president, are known for passing what's called the crime bill, but its full name is the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994. And really, that one really it's really sick because we talk about how Bill Clinton, his tough on crime rhetoric really was a reason why we have overcrowded, mass incarceration, or one of the biggest, influences of mass incarceration. And then I could kind of play it down, but going through the language is pretty sick because they incentivize, and those numbers are there at the bottom. The bill incentivized prisons to let me refresh myself. But really incentivized prisons to essentially gain more inmates, and they gave them grants from the federal government for doing that as a result of the war on drugs. And you see the money go up from $175 million to $2 billion over 5 years from the federal government and funding for prisons. And that's pretty sick, especially when it comes to how that was used and targeted for the Black community, and one of the staples for mass incarceration in our communities. The language of this is a lot longer, but I pick out the most pertinent parts, especially the part where it incentivizes prisons really to expand and how to get more money. It's really sick. Next slide, please. Perfect. So here's where we get into more contemporary stuff. No, so in addressing the impact of the war on drugs, as I said, it targeted more than often users than sellers at a ratio about really 8 to 2, whatever. If you break it down, what that is 4 to 1. My math is right. Yeah. But yeah, 80% of the time, the whatever government arrested possessors over sellers, which really prioritized the criminalization of drug users. Then on top of that, something we must know is that during the war on drugs, the police had the least inflated. Not saying their budget wasn't inflated, and the numbers are around about 350 to 400% inflated during the war on drugs for the police. But out of the criminal justice system, the correction system and the judicial system had budgets that were inflated a percentage higher than the police. So not only are the police responsible for addressing, or the police are responsible for enforcing the war on drugs, our correction system, and of course, the judicial system have a large role in upholding the war on drugs. And that's really how we see it in policy right now. Not only are we talking about defunding the police, but we're talking about defunding the police, then we have to talk about prison abolition. But then on top of that, what often gets left out, and I do some expungement work, is having some of these judges who just aren't budging and are there for either lifetime appointments or their terms are for however long, 8 to 12 years. So you're dealing with these judges who are conservative, who really, and people don't really understand that local judges are elected. And this really affects how you can get expungements, you can get people out of jail, and how they view crime on a different spectrum. So it's pretty interesting. And it's all relative. So the current state efforts in cannabis equity do not repair the damage created by the war on drugs. Because we really just, for the most part, I've really been seeing just a lot of rhetoric for, when it comes to equity in the cannabis space here in California, being for business support and access to capital, interest to the market, but doesn't actually repair any of the actual damage done by the war on drugs with regards to mass incarceration, when it comes to the trauma afflicted by as a result of mass incarceration and having single family homes or families with no homes. With no parents. No, any of the trauma affected by the war on drugs, it does not address. It actually just works, it seeks to go forward, but not retroactive and, being really equitable and intentional about including folks who have been impacted by the war on drugs. Next slide, please. Interesting. What slide was this? Give me a second.
I can try to screen share just that slide.
No, I got it. Perfect. So the next slide said, what is equity in cannabis? And equity in cannabis is really equitable policies in the cannabis industry that seek to address the negative socioeconomic results of the war on drugs. And there are different parts to it. It focuses on reducing barriers to market entry for individuals adversely impacted by the war on drugs, while also erasing the criminal records for communities who were targeted by these repugnant policies. And these various things include business technical assistance, access to capital, expungement and reentry support, and youth prevention and education. And actually, we probably will see that grow, and we are seeing that grow as the cannabis industry gets a little bit more developed and expands. And if they're, everything is going to, I won't say everything's going to start changing, but everything's going to start growing into ways that money can be spent to support communities impacted by the war on drugs. Could you go back one slide? I think it should be arrest rate statistics. There we are. So there was a study conducted, an equity study, statewide by some friends of mine at an organization called Public Health Advocates, and they partner with UC Davis. And this one I include Contra Costa County because that's where I'm from, and that's where some of my expungement efforts are going towards in Richmond. But among the cities included in the analysis, the cities of Palo Alto, Southgate, Newport Beach, Richmond, Santa Monica, SF, Torrance, Pasadena, Glendale, Mountain View, Long Beach, Downey, and Whittier had relatively high average Black arrest rates. In Richmond, the ratio for white to Black arrest rates has been 1 to 11. So for every one white person arrested for cannabis, there was 11 Black people arrested, or Black persons arrested for cannabis possession. And between the years 1996 and 2006, Black people were arrested at a rate 272% higher than white people. And to access this whole report, I have the stats and reference, the data referenced below. And you can click that link, or if you Google "When the Smoke Clears" PHA study, cannabis study, it will pop up in Google. Next slide, please. So the economic effects of incarceration. So what I've been doing, and I focus a lot on expungements right now and community education on CRJ reform and stuff like that. And so I went through a few studies from Harvard, Michigan, Stanford, and where else? I think that was it. And they went over some of the effects of incarceration on, and that they making a case for the expungement. Some of the economic effects of incarceration are deterioration in a worker's human capital, which means loss of educational opportunities, on-the-job experience, the denigration of soft skills, elimination of social networks that help gain employment. Then, of course, we know if you have a felony on your record, accessing housing is very hard to come by, and accessing housing is very hard, which plays into our, houselessness crisis that we have in every city, and for the most part in California and the United States. And so it's very much cyclical, and it's very much interrelated when it comes to economics and law, which is why I'm kind of in both worlds. The studies reported this. Every study said the same thing. In 2008, the United States economy lost an equivalent of 1.5 to 1.7 million workers as a result of incarceration. In terms of GDP, of course, I study economics. In terms of GDP, incarceration resulted in the loss of productivity output between $57 and $65 billion, which averages to about $38,000 per worker, which is really the average salary for the average, American. So those numbers to me are pretty accurate. But that's interesting that, and this is where I as an economist, when appealing to some of these conservatives in my area and other areas when it comes to cannabis regulation, I always pitch the economic kind of lens because they respond most of that. When it comes to anything, when it comes to if they're on the other side of the fence with regards to morally, I try to get them on the the benefit for fiscal impact or economic impact for creating legislation. So recently, I don't think I included this, but recently with some folks and we did an economic study based on these Harvard and Stanford studies arguing for the removal of the what's it called? There's a fee, not necessarily a fee, but there's an administrative fee in Sacramento County for conducting an expungement. So we had to argue that if you got rid of this fee, we could get more people, we could, have more people access expungements. Then we kind of referenced their, the data from Stanford and Harvard. Next slide, actually, this is going to make more sense. There we go. So the fiscal impact, and I'll get to that in a second. But from the studies also reported that what they averaged, they saw an average of a 30% increase in income over the lifespan of individuals who have received an expungement. So we kind of did our own numbers. So we ran kind of a sliding scale from 5,000, 10,000, 15,000, all the way up to 40,000, and basically saw what their income will be if we increase that by 30%. And we ran it from 5,000 with the max being 40,000. And we basically saw that at the most, per 100 expungements, if all 100 of those individuals at an income of $40,000 had a 30% boost from their income based on the expungement, that would generate about a $1.2 million in economic activity to the county's GDP. That's for 100 expungements. At the lowest level, at around $10,000, we will generate an additional $285,000 per 100 individuals for the total economy. Then we went to break that down to see if we can even get more buy-in from other industries. There was a report that we referenced that said that for the most part, individuals between zero income and $50,000 in income spend an average of 41% of their income on housing, then about 9% on transportation, 9% on food, and then 8% on healthcare. And if we hold that steady with the 30% income boost from 0, 5,000, 2,000, 15,000, at a level of 41% for housing, then you get an additional, I think we found, that never escaping me, but we, of course, that we found about another $900,000 in additional income to housing, and I can share that report with you guys as well. I might share with you, Jay, in a Google Doc. But yeah, that's how we, that's just how we ran some numbers to say, hey, if we can even get more housing in the city, or there's more, have more expenditures on housing if we get the people expunged because they're facing an income boost, and if they hold their expenditures constant. So the fiscal impact, Santa Clara study found, based on a cross-benefit analysis of expungement, that the increased income as a result of expungement increased tax revenue to the city because people's income increased. But not only did it increase their income, which resulted in increased taxes, which resulted in more taxes to the city, but also relieved pressure on. Sorry, notification that threw me off. It also relieved pressure on the government to support some of these individuals who are on programs that require subsidies, because now they're being lifted in a state out of poverty, not even out of poverty, but their income is being lifted to a point that they require less support from the government and can rely on their own income to support themselves. Which also means that more people can go on that government support for subsidies who may not have the background or the ability to live on their own wherewithal. And in the rhetoric that I took for Richmond, because Richmond has a budget shortfall, and they have been running a budget shortfall for the past 5 years. Their current one is they were short $20 million, and they got that down to $5 million. So my argument is that, hey, if you begin to regulate a cannabis market and you allow for more expungements, you can actually reduce the amount of people you're supporting on some of these subsidized housing or subsidized benefits, but also have more revenue increase to the city on the flip side by taxing cannabis businesses and taxing cannabis regulation. So, that's some of the arguments I posed to conservatives on the fiscal side of that as well. Next slide, please. Perfect. Yes. So here's the economic argument for expungement. And that Harvard Law Review study reported that only 5% of the population that is eligible for expungement actually received the expungement within the first 5 years. So if 5% of individuals and there's a plethora of individuals who are actually eligible for expungement receive them, how do we increase it? The more that we increase, the more we increase access to expungements, the more expungements happen, the more incomes are generated, the more incomes increase. Therefore, we have a better economic environment. That's literally a summation of what I would say to a conservative who isn't for cannabis regulation in the policy field. And this is where I go over the numbers. I did mention briefly numbers that we did as a Justice and Jobs Coalition with regards to the sliding scale for the income boosted expungement. Give some time for you guys to read that, because actually I love that, because I did that study. Next slide, please. That might be it. Okay, cool. So if we want to spend more time on the last one, we can, but if not, that's it. Thank you guys again for the space. I talk a lot about the war on drugs, a little bit more theoretical and theory-based stuff about the war on drugs in my book.
Thank you so much, Khalil. That was a great overview of the many issues relevant to the war on drugs.
You're a little choppy, sis.
I'm sorry if my mic is kind of messed up on this computer, which is why I was hoping my Mac would work. But Jessica, can you stop share? Thank you. Okay. All right, so yes, it was definitely a lot of content, very important stuff and breakdowns. And we'll be moving into our Q&A. But before we do that, I just wanted to highlight your text. This is something that you will all be receiving a hard copy of in your swag bags that will be sent out sometime in the next few weeks. We'll also provide a PDF document so that you can complete your homework assignment. The information provided in this presentation will be necessary for the completion of your homework. So it's very crucial for y'all to take this space to ask any questions, any clarifications. But as you start to think about questions you may have, I'll read this short blurb about this amazing text that I literally just got, and I've been, oh my gosh, it's really changing my life. So this book highlights political and economic mechanisms that have hindered global Black political and economic progression and perpetrated Black subjugation contemporarily, ranging from mechanisms within the United States to strategies used to extend European power on the continent, which has been defined by Kwame Nkrumah as neocolonialism, which you were speaking about a little in our group. Subservience is a book of your selected essays that highlight mechanics used to subjugate economically and politically Black people throughout the globe. You'll find that Black people in America, Black people in the diaspora, as well as on the continent, share the same vicissitudes. Therefore, the only way to repudiate our socioeconomic status is to extirpate the system of colonialism and neocolonialism. You're really trying my list right now with all of these fancy words, but in short, that is a summary of what this book entails. So it's loaded with a lot of information, very critical to understanding the issues of Black diaspora. So without further ado, we will move into our Q&A. And feel free to answer out loud as well. I mean, to ask out loud. And if you need to, we can reshare those slides, Khalil, to reference any answers.
Yeah. I have a few questions.
Yeah.
So Khalil, so for my first question would be, so how exactly, I was just wondering if you know, and how like the school to prison pipeline would kind of play into this, and how we could kind of like, you know, how that has like a factor coming into this.
Yeah, definitely from an anecdotal standpoint. I don't think anyone's done the research yet, but I think we'll need to analyze the amount of, I think there's definitely a correlation between the amount of suspensions and dropouts and expulsions as a result of cannabis related possessions during that time period, and how that plays into the prison, the prison pipeline system. Anecdotally, I have friends that I know and people that I, associates, I guess, if you want to call them now, in Richmond and in Sacramento. Well, I haven't grown up in Sacramento, but I know of students now who either, at a young age started selling weed and engaging, and selling drugs or smoking weed at a young age. And typically those are the ones who are not as, as supported by the school system, which, it's a direct result of the school, prison pipeline. Which is why youth prevention to an extent is so important throughout these cannabis tax dollars. However, how we don't, and what we're advocating now is a lot of these dollars are being funneled through the police systems. So there's the community, there's the part of the budget for the state goes towards the Board of State and Community Corrections. And I have another group of friends or associates who are working on getting those dollars to the community. But our consensus is that you have to go through the for the the CDCR or the SAC sheriff to get some of these resources. And why we don't want to again introduce our youth to the police in that manner, because it's usually the police who are some of the perpetuators of the trauma outside of the home. From our studies, at least, we know that some of the youth who aren't supported in school also aren't supported in the household. So it's like I really still wouldn't know where to start. But to answer your question, there definitely is a relationship between cannabis possession and usage with regards to and being an expulsion and suspension, primarily for my studies have been on young Black boys in the prison pipeline system.
Thank you. And also my next question, I saw a holistic balanced budget. Could you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, and that's just fancy language that I use to these, in policy to tell holistic balanced budget is basically saying the budget's at either expenditures match anticipated expenditures match revenue. That's just it's just fancy language we use because policymakers like using fancy language. And like the holistic just means the whole budget is balanced. It just means it's there's no deficit. It's at zero.
Okay. And I have a few more questions. So when you were doing your research on expungement, what factors came into play when trying to receive your expungement for to keep in mind, if we were to help out youth in the future, what are some pointers that you would give us to kind of pass along? Any information that you didn't know, any good information or something like do's and don'ts on the road to expungement?
I wouldn't say there aren't any do's and don'ts. If someone wants to get an expungement or doesn't even know if they're eligible, I just tell them go ahead and try. If they're to low income, there's a lot of low income or there really is low income or no income services for expungement, at least in Sacramento. I'm sure because Sacramento is a lot usually behind the Bay Area, that you can find some supportive services in the Bay Area for low income individuals who want to get expungements. Even still, we're also seeing a rise of just expungement clinics in general. And I think I'm actually planning one and trying to get grant money to do some in Sacramento. I don't care what your income is. If you need an expungement, we need an expungement because we don't like the carceral state. But with regards to pointers, I would say that I'm gonna look up the study real quick. I'm gonna drop that in the chat. But just some of the pointers that some of the barriers that at least the Harvard and Michigan law schools saw was that, for one, the first thing is access to expungements. A lot of folks in low-income communities don't even realize they have the ability to expunge their records or even know where to start and how to start with regards to that. Then the second part is that they said is it's not often palatable for their time because of for the interest, because they have to take off from work, take transportation to the public defender's office or wherever that office is that's taking care of the expungement. And as economists, these are all posing losses because while they're taking care of this, they're not at work or the transfer, they're losing money that they could be making is to pay their bills or keep their household fed. So those are some of the things that they saw are problems with that. From our work, I just mentioned that some top of my head. And our work and doing expungement, we've seen that because it's so, for one, the court system is so behind. A lot of them are still on paper, their systems are so behind. They're so focused on they're on paper management, all that stuff, that it's often hard to get your records. The communication between records clearance and the police systems is often inadequate. So let's say you get your record expunged. What we often see is that they get the record expunged, but that will not show up on the police system or the background check for a good maybe 6 to 9 months. And we're trying to expedite that, because that's not, if you're getting your record expunged for a job and it still shows up on your record and you don't get the job because of that, there's really no, it's a gray area. Whose hands is that in? Because on one hand, the employer shows you have a criminal record, but the courts, have expunged that. And then another barrier that we've seen is that if someone has multiple expungements and don't know where their actual arrest is from, And then if you're low income, let's say you were incarcerated in LA County and you now live in Sacramento County, getting access to that information is not as easy, and of course takes work and money. Some of the barriers to getting your record fully expunged. But I do want to note that a very good benefit for expungement is not necessarily expunging your record, but even getting a reduction. So if you have a felony, and often with a lot of the the current laws being passed in California, a lot of these old rules, these old sentences and records are eligible for reductions, and that's a big thing to go from a felony to a misdemeanor. Even something like that can help you find a job and get housing. So things like that are something are some of the benefits that I see, and of course, you actually want their gun rights restored. So even something as simple as getting a gun charge from a felony down to a misdemeanor can get you eligible for that 10-year waiting period from your conviction, or time of from conviction, to restore your gun rights.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this information.
I'm going to briefly look up that Harvard Law study on expungements and drop that link in the chat.
I have a question on expungements. I don't know if you can take it while you're looking for the link or whether.
I already found it. You're all good.
Okay. So my question is, are there studies that are tracking expungements with measures of equity like income, ethnicity, geographic location, like the fact that there are a lot more people in LA and everything is harder there? Are there people who are studying and keeping track of, within that 5% of people who have gotten expungements, where is the privilege there in terms of, income level, ethnicity, et cetera?
Yeah, that's what I pointed out. I just gave a panel discussion on this with the public defenders and some prosecutors who are helping support expungement. And that's what I brought up. Like, there's just so many, as an economist, I'm like, yeah, we have this amount of people who received expungements, but what was there? And we're talking for calculating income as well. Like, are they calculating people who got their record expunged but didn't necessarily get a job and went to entrepreneurship and became millionaires? Like, what's skewing my data? And that's what I can't account for. But I would say yes. But one of the first things that these 3 studies revealed, said that while we have data here, this data is really hard to accumulate and track, because with regards to income levels and over time periods, the follow-up is some of the hardest piece of that. But also because they don't have access to the employee records, from the private. You have to work with, like, I think the Stanford review, the Santa Clara one worked with Stanford as well as an organization who wanted to and who willingly participated and gave that information to the lawyers about the income level changes. And that's something that you would have to get buy-in from employers to give out to even understand, what the actual data is for people who are, getting their expungements and then, their income boost. So people are trying to study that. And I even posed that's my public defender out here in SAC. And they said they are already on it. They're trying to, they have this way of doing it where they focus on homelessness for expungements. Because I didn't know, and she brought this up, that to get into a homeless shelter or a warm shelter in Sacramento, that you have to show that you do not have a record, do not have any warrants. So they help get rid of that here in Sacramento, or at least provide you with that letter saying you don't have any warrants, so you can get into the shelter for the time being. But they're helping to do that, and while they're doing that, they're collecting every bit of information that they can while they're doing that to help to track with that. But it's so meticulous and so hard, and of course public defenders are often underfunded, that you can only do so much, and it's really just a really insurmountable task that we're trying to play catch up on when it comes to expungements and tracking the data. But yes, I can say that there are people who are beginning to try, who are making attempts to track the data as best as they can as we move forward.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
I do have one more question.
Okay, you have a question. I was going to say you'll take one more question.
So just because I don't know how to ask this question. It's kind of a hard question. It's like a little nerve-wracking. So as someone who's from the Latinx community, and this kind of targets, my community as well, but also the African-American community, what would be some pointers from, me being a leader? And obviously I'm going to be working with not just the Latinx community. So with me having wonderful leaders here, what would be some pointers that you can give me to kind of do's and don'ts? Because my biggest fear is for me to be speaking and like, you know, especially on topics like this that do target different communities, like how my biggest fear is to kind of like be speaking and like, you know, getting those looks like he did not just say that. You know what I mean? And like when we're just trying to be relatable, just trying to like, you know, so what are some pointers like that you guys would give?
I think like we all, when we're building a community, we're, you know, always be open to others' perspectives, because there's even, you know, in Sacramento we have a very, and I'm not used to the community that we have because I'm from Richmond, and for me, when I always mention Black communities, I always say Black and brown, just because I grew up with, you know, poor white people and, you know, poor Mexicans. You know, of course the Mexicans and the Blacks, we had our feuds, but we were tighter than, you know, we're you know, I come to Sacramento. And we're like, you know, you can love and you know a lot about the like Mexican culture. And I'm like, yeah, I grew up with them. That's family to me. For real. I call them sister and brother for real. So I'm like, when I always speak, and I always mention Black and brown, because understanding that they are, you know, the police don't like them as much as they don't like us. So I'm like, that's the point I always make to say that. And it's pretty interesting because I'm talking to my business partner, and I'm like, I don't like how this current environment is going right now, because a lot of the rhetoric is strictly Black. And I'm like, no, dog, like, yes, I'm Black and I want to support, you know, the Black community, but I'm like, we have to be honest about, you know, a lot of the rhetoric about the war on drugs. It really has a Black face. And I'm like, yes, you know, as me, I'm gonna say that's how it should be. But I'm like, we have to acknowledge that the war on drugs just specifically didn't target, you know, just the Black community. Often when we have places like Oakland, SF, and Richmond, where the war on drugs was targeted, it was not just Black individuals who were affected by that. And then I often bring up that and Dr. Weber's bill, when she passed AB 392, which is the California Act of Saving Lives, it was mentioned that, you know, the Latinx community gets targeted more by the police and killed at a higher rate than Black people. And I'm like, of course, you know, for population wise, it makes sense. But I'm like, we have to acknowledge the facts that like the war on drug and policing affect us in the same manner and in that way. That's the way I approach it all, you know, at all times. It's not just strictly something. That's why I mentioned colonized communities, because we're all colonized communities. I think there really is no way to avoid to that at sometimes, but just being you know, intentional, but understanding the impact of what you say as well, and the intentionality of what you say. So of course, I'm always gonna say represent your community, and even more so, I'm gonna even start advocating more to, you know, to start talking about, you know, how the war on drugs affected the Latinx community and other communities, because right now I'm having to do policy and folks are just talking about, you know, the Black community. I'm like, dog, like let's talk about, like, there's other communities I know they're gonna start, you know, other leaders like yourself, we're gonna start advocating for how the war on drugs affected Latinx communities and various communities. We can talk about how it affected, you know, just really poor communities in general for the most part, or communities that were, you know, just targeted by the war on drugs to an extent, and be inclusive, because just doing this, you know, this just strictly Black thing, or this strictly Black rhetoric when it comes to the war on drugs is going to lead to being divisiveness when it comes to fighting for resources. Because now what's, oh yeah, the Blacks are fighting against the Latinx, the Latinos, the Mexicans for war on drugs resources, and now you got the chambers, however, or the, you know, the organizations going back and forth, and now we don't have any unity against the structure, which we really don't like. And that's what I see. I kind of see that happening already, and that's what, you know, what I don't want to happen. So, like Jay said, just our experience is so parallel, even down to the chunk, down to the chancla. But that's real. And you know, we have to just remember that when we go in our policy and our, you know, things, and even to reiterate that, you know, when if pushback ever does come up from, if it's from the Black community, from whatever community that you know you're trying to take over, like we in the same boat, for real. We colonize in the same way. We get killed the same way, incarcerated the same way. And maybe not at the same rates, but we are still affected by this, you know, the marginalization and disenfranchisement by this, you know, the state apparatus.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Khalil. I definitely felt that last part. I feel like anybody who's in between that spectrum, or like, you know, away from that side of whiteness, are subjected to amounts of oppression that, you know, is definitely something to consider as we develop our leadership projects. And especially, like, I really want y'all to look at these slides. I'll share Khalil's slides with you as well. There's many issue topics that you can, I'm sorry, my camera's off. I just don't want the connection to cut out. But there's many issue topics that you can further explore and expand upon relevant to advocating for changes locally in policy. So when you were talking about expungement, you know, it really just, you know, the lack of empathy, the lack of logic and reason, like, for instance, record keeping and stuff like that, exposes the need to dismantle these systems of supposed remedy. And that claim came really clear when you were speaking on expungement and ways to funnel money into communities that need it, you know, like solutions oriented in supporting those in need so that we turn away from these reactive systems of punishment into an active preventative one, not rooted in further oppressing the victims of the systemic trauma, but instead rooted in accessibility to resources of knowledge and support. And so definitely, this is a remarkable example of how you can utilize personal experiences, statistics, data to create, to further codify what you're arguing for, the changes that you're arguing for. Because of course we can all sit here and relate with each other, but there's people out there that really can't relate to our experiences, or you know, they want it to be proved, like they need the proof, they need the statistics. So the way that Khalil put it, it's in your face. There's no arguing against all of these issues that you brought up. So I really appreciate you coming and holding space with us. It's been a pleasure. I heard from the last cohort that you killed it. And I just want to say, like, I feel blessed to have you in this space, especially as our kickoff, because I couldn't have summarized it as best as you did. I would probably need about 2 days. So yeah, thank you so much, Khalil. I appreciate it.
No, it's dense. And of course, again, thank you so much for having me in this space and allowing me to share and present the space for real. And I thought another point to Felipe's, whenever you receive my book, and the one of the very last articles I wrote and put in the book, because this is version 2, was about how the environment in the hood creates our art. And I focus on how Mozzie and Tupac are very much revolutionary as a result of the storytelling that goes on in Mozzie's music that we hear based on the circumstances and the environment that we grow in, that's created from settler colonialism and introducing us as colonized individuals to constant violence. You know, being poor is violent. And as a result of being poor, you're often fighting for resources, which, you know, results in crime, which results into you know, interacting with the police, who rely on violence as their legitimate source of, you know, power. Then you end up in a prison system, which is another violent institution. And then once you get out, then they're cyclical. So like, just a cyclical nature of our environment and that nature. So I figured you might like that in that sense.
You know, it's so funny that you, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Is there a link that we can get for that article by any chance?
I believe Jay said they're going to come in goodie bags, your swag bags that are going to come to you all.
Okay.
Yeah, and y'all also have access to a link for the PDF document. But it's so funny that you mentioned the revolution in music, because I'm a big music head. And when I was getting my race and law minor, one of my professors, he wrote this book. It's called Party Music. And it talks about literally the musical timeline in parallel to the movement with the Black Panthers and all of just everything that comes out of there, just the inside story of how the Black Panthers band and how Black power transformed soul music. And so it was kind of interesting that you brought it to more contemporary.
And it's beautiful because a lot of the Afro beats that we hear now, they're being played, started with, I forgot brother's name, but he, Fela, I forgot. But the Afro beats that we hear now are inspired by him, and his song was very much anti-colonial, and you know, was made during a time where his music promoted dissidents against the colonial government, so they banned him. And then another example is Bob Marley's music. You know, we love it now and listen to the lyrics and apply to politics today, but there's very much so, you know, that same kind of, you know, revolutionary anti-colonial government music that was, you know, helped fuel a lot of these rebellions, not rebellions, but these uprisings in these, you know, in the anti-colonial territories. So
yeah,
very much is important.
Love it. You know, music has been fueling us from the beginning of time, so it's lovely to see. Again, thank you, Khalil. We got 3 minutes left, and I just wanted to go into some closing remarks. Kenny, take it off. Is Kenny mute? Okay, for the sake of time, I'll just read it. So our next steps will be connecting you with your CACs. I hate being off camera when I'm speaking, so I'm just gonna risk it. Hopefully you can y'all hear me?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, cool.
So, right, so what we're gonna do is make sure you connect with your CAC so you can get connected with your coaches. If we don't have coaches for you yet, we will find coaches for you. Mark your calendars for the Monday meetings. As you can see, we try and bless you guys with as much information as possible, good information, so that this project, after 12 weeks, you guys can create something and develop something very unique and remarkable within your region. Let's set up time so we can set up these regional meetings. We talked about that in some of your small groups, and just get familiar with the 4 leaders folder. If you have any questions, feel free to call, text, email your CACs, and they're available to help you navigate timesheets and documents and all of that good stuff. So for now, mark your calendars. Next meeting will be the February the 15th from 5 to 7. And also accept the calendar invite. All of you guys will be linked on the calendar invite. Accept it so you get pop-up messages on your phones, devices, so you know the meetings are coming up.
Thank you, Kenny. Well, congrats, y'all. Y'all just sat through y'all first overview session. We're going to be going into more trainings, which are going to require y'all to break out. So hopefully you get acquainted in your regional meetings this week. Be on the lookout for an email specifying those times, as well as your homework. So I think we should be able to send out that homework assignment by tonight, but no later than tomorrow morning. And that will be due before our next meeting on February 15th. So if there's no other questions, I'm muted. If there's no other questions, feel free to regain your time for your own leisure.
Khalil, are you taking on any mentees? Like, just like if you have any questions about like, like articles or anything that new that you found out about, like how could we reach you? Or if you have any questions or anything.
Yeah, like Jay said, I'm literally always posting on Instagram about what I'm reading or some kind of an article, something. I'm always posting some kind of information. If you follow me, it's literally my name, Khalil J. Ferguson. Reach me on there. I'm very much responsive. I'm always on the go, so I'm always on my phone responding to an email. I'm always on my phone or my laptop, regardless. Those are like my 2 best friends because mainly my calendar is on my laptop, and I need my calendar. So yes, reach out to me, and I'm very responsive and always, very much so open. Love talking about politics and love talking about data. Data, really, politics I'm becoming annoyed with, but data, always love talking about data. I'm like very much a data nerd. So when Heather had that question for me, I really just love it because people don't really understand the meticulousness of data. So I'm ready to talk data and all that stuff all the time.
Sick. Thank you so much.
No problem.
If you ever want to talk finance, I have an MBA.
Oh, beautiful. I'm my next goal. I'm wanting to get my main goal, no matter what, I do in my career is, whether it's business, I don't really care for the business. I don't care to make money. I want my PhD in international development to go help the motherland and Latin America develop. And, that's in a way that's against the US centered, European centered way of development. So that's my next goal is getting everything started for that.
Nice.
Nice.
All right, y'all, it's 7:02 on the dot. I think we can stop record if someone hasn't already.